Welcome, welcome, welcome. And thank you for joining us on another episode of today's Electrical Estimating. I'm your co-host, Chris Trommer, and I'm usually joined by our other co-host, Sal Berta. But today's episode is a bit different. It deals more with current events, particularly the military operations in the Gulf, and what's occurring across the world is affecting the electrical and construction industry in America. We've all seen these higher gas prices and diesel prices, and we've heard what's on the news, but how does that really trickle down what we're going to be seeing on our job sites? So, to help me, we've brought back a guest that we've spoken with last year when we were discussing the rolling out of tariffs, Keith Prather. Keith is the managing director of Armada Corporate Intelligence, and they monitor the market forces that shape a company's environment, and then they give them time to strategize a way through it. So we thought he'd be the perfect guest to join us today to provide you some insight into what we're seeing and how is that going to affect us in the near future and the long term, particularly the electrical industry, but I guess more generally the construction industry as a whole. We hope you have a couple minutes, sit down, relax, get caught up with what's going on. And as always, if this is your first time joining us, please hit the subscribe button. We'll be rolling out new episodes very soon for everybody. Thank you again for joining us and enjoy. That you were talking about a lot during our previous conversation on tariffs was the current war or military intervention or whatever it's being called at this moment within Iran. The side effect of that, cause effect, I guess, is the Strait of Hormuz being shut down. This is a current event. It is something that I think is going to affect the construction industry, but I don't think people understand how directly the strait getting shut down is affecting them. I think people look at it as, oh, there's oil and diesel, so my home heating prices are going up. Obviously, we see it at the gas pump. Fertilizer, maybe if they're actually paying attention to that degree and understanding the importing of that and the food, but that's even getting past it. I think the only thing people understand is we're in a war with Iran, and could you able to at this time maybe give some insight into the construction industry and how what is happening or how it's happening right now is going to trickle down?
Yeah, absolutely. So just real fast, so the war in Iran is hitting a brand new phase. So we've gone in and done a lot of the conventional warfare, airstrikes, watching missile strikes, and we're at now a point where we're into kind of like a guerrilla warfare stage, as I kind of mentioned earlier, and that makes it much more difficult to try and completely open the strait, and that's why it's very difficult for us right now at this moment to be able to get a ship with any flag on it through the Strait of Hormuz. And now they're threatening also to maybe continue to use the Houthi rebels in Yemen to be shutting down what is essentially the Suez Canal,
Mhm.
which we've been through that time and time again, but that's really just disrupting global supply chains. So two things, even if the strait were to open tomorrow, okay, there are products that come out of Iran that are not going to be flowing out of Iran anytime soon. And so, we talk about the obvious ones, as you said, Chris, which is petroleum, fuel, and then primarily urea fertilizer that would go into farming. You got about 3% of the world's urea coming out of that area. So even if we open the strait and you start to see products flowing from all the other countries in the strait other than Iran, we still have a global supply chain issue. The ripple effect is what we're watching right now. So, for instance, a lot of LNG flows out of the strait into areas like India, China, South Korea, and LNG is powering a lot of their electrical plants, a lot of the manufacturing facilities, and so we've already seen an immediate 30% spike in some construction materials. Maybe not necessarily what we're seeing in the electrical components, but in things like flanges, stainless steel production, some of those materials, and so that affects the overall cost of the project. And this is instant; it's hitting hard right now. You would expect that to kind of ripple through the construction sector in 3 to 4 months. As we use inventories, we replenish inventories. That's when we get hit with that wave. The other thing that we're not seeing and not really hitting the news a lot, not heavily, is things like neon. About 33% of the world's neon comes out of Iran and out of the Strait of Hormuz area, the Persian Gulf area. And neon is a critical component in semiconductor manufacturing. So they have to have neon to be able to finish off semiconductors. There's also other materials that we get 30 to 40% of our world's supply coming out of the strait that are used, for like cleaning the surfaces and to do other things in semiconductor manufacturing. So you take that cost of energy on top of that, and countries like South Korea are already warning that they think that they're going to have to trim semiconductor output between now and the end of the year. Just not going to be able to meet a lot of order demand. So if I'm doing a construction project and I know that I can't get, advanced, HVAC materials, security systems, anything that has a chip related component to it, or if those prices are surging, yeah, it may affect the actual construction project itself. It's going to delay a lot of shipments and shipment volumes. The other thing we know is that historically, when we've seen diesel prices go above $5 a gallon, if it's sustained for more than 3 or 4 months, that's when we start to see a real headwind on the economy, and you see the economy start to decelerate. And, we're right at that $5 mark now. Again, it's only been sustained for about 3 weeks. The duration is the key, and if it goes again if it goes out another month, another 2 months, then we start worrying about the material impact on the economy, and then material prices will definitely go up, transportation costs go up, etcetera.
Okay, so obviously the first one, and we talked about it, gas, diesel. So obviously, fleet management, you're going to start getting hit from, I would say, a month ago, 245, where now that same gas station's 375. So obviously, fleet management, the initial feeling for a guy on the ground is gas prices. Depending how big your fleet is, that can add up rather quickly within a week.
Right.
Secondary is going to be coming out of the straight, those high top funnel kind of commodities that are then going to be shipped through there and driven across the sea over to India and South Korea to create end final products that are going to be shipped here for construction. But, some of them, as you said, we might be feeling now, but some people in the electrical industry, it might take another month, 3 months before we feel that because of the cost of increase in production fuel for that. So this is the whole trickle down effect where we're not even thinking about how that's going to hit down. So we could start seeing products in the electrical and lighting industry being affected maybe 2, 3 months out. If it continues the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, on the high end, I mean, I think near term, you're already probably feeling it.
Okay.
I just looked and diesel prices are up to about 547 or 537 right now, so that's
Yeah.
pretty high. Right now, the trucking spot rates, yeah, fuel prices are up 33% year over year, and that was through the end of February, just week over week, at the beginning of March and to this week, up about 6%. And month over month, almost 29% higher, and we're seeing now spot rates up about 3%. I mean, it's starting to have that impact that we were worried about. So, there will be some of that impact instantly. Yeah, like we talked about before, we're starting to see supply chain as we
That's
see
right.
companies trying to get ahead of the risk. We're starting to see people inbound a lot of freight, and so those volumes now are causing prices to go up and causing them to surge. I'm just looking at maritime rates here real quick, and inbounding anything from Asia to the US, yeah, you're looking at anywhere from 10 to 20% increase. If it's going to Europe, prices are already up 20% or more just for the cost of the maritime side of it, shipping a container.
So that's our trickle down right there. Is, looking at fuel coming from the Persian Gulf through the Strait, going to these countries that are then importing products to America. You're paying a higher charge to import them, not because of tariffs, but because the fuel to run the ships are going up right now.
Yeah.
So that's going to affect your price on the product, but also the fuel to run the factories that are creating the product overseas are starting to go up. So you're going to see a decrease off of that portion as well. And then as it hits our shores, you're looking at transportation fuel already going up for trucks that are our main transportation. So anything coming out of the port has to be put onto an 18 wheeler driven. And so you're looking at the cost there. And then for your guys just to go out to the job to take that product that you're paying more on because the increase of costs that are now trickling down, you're paying higher gas prices when you're driving out to the job itself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like you said too. So we're already seeing the effects, but it's now these costs that they're seeing that could be starting to rise in the very near future for product isn't because of inflation or something else. It could be, but we're seeing the effect of the strait affecting every other portion of how these products that are ending up in the end user's hands being increased substantially month over month, year over year, week over week, to a point to where that is trickling down now to that contractor installing the product today at a job site.
Yeah, absolutely. And supply related disruptions and inflation based on that is harder to recover from. In 21 and 22, that's really what that was caused by was supply disruptions. You'd have a COVID case on at a port in Shanghai, the biggest port in the world, and they shut the port down for a month, and that was back then. Now it's conflict, and I will say this one thing that we didn't talk about is there are a lot of US suppliers now that are exporting products out of the US to backfill areas around the world like petrochems. Think about things that go into plastics manufacturing
Mhm.
and so many different materials, just the plastic wiring casings,
Oh, yeah.
so many things. But the petrochem industry now is starting to see a surge in prices, and US suppliers are now kind of saying, to domestic buyer, if you want to get that product, you may have the global price because I can ship this thing to Europe and I can get, much higher price for it if I ship it to my European buyer.
So instead of these companies and corporations turning around and going, hey, this is sort of like a turmoil across the world. This is causing some kind of, sort of national security when it comes to product production that can affect us. They're saying they're doing what companies do, and they're saying, "Well, I can get paid more if I ship this to Europe." And either the U.S. pays me what pays me the European rates, and I keep it here, or kick rocks, and I'm going to go get my money, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Now, some
So,
of them will uphold their agreements, and they're gonna be great about it, but, like, especially, I mean, we're exporting LNG, which is great, we don't consume a ton of it in the US, so it's a nice boom and nice boost to economic activity here, but there are other commodities where we do compete for those items in the US, and now we're gonna see tighter supplies, and so that inflationary pressure will kinda ripple through. You got some
yeah,
Wall Street banks out there warning now on inflation surges because of this, and it's already they believe it's already too late to reverse it right away. It's going to take 8, 9, 10 months to unwind it.
yeah, because even after COVID, I mean, we had that whole supply chain issue, and that was because everything was shut down. You had to get back up and running, and then everything had. So even with this 4 weeks of being held up in the strait, we could be looking at 6 months of prices being impacted before we see any relief from these prices because they'll have to get back up and running and get things shipped and get to the people. There's going to be a delay. I mean, we could be looking at 12 months of higher prices until this gets figured out. So,
Yeah, yeah, because, even if you've got a ship on water waiting to get loaded and the Strait open tomorrow, you've got 4 or 5 days for it to transit in, find a berth, to get locked, to get loaded. You talk about a week to maybe 10 days to get inbound, get it loaded, and get it back outbound, and then 2-week transits, assuming it maybe can go through the Suez Canal into Europe. If not, you've gotta add another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, so you're talking another 3 or 4 weeks just before it gets to its port to unload. And then you've got to, move it from there inland distribution and get it into a system. So yeah, I mean, you're talking already if it opens tomorrow, you're still talking 4 or 5 weeks before you start to see the normal flows.
yeah. Our main conversation was tariffs, and we talked about that. But for the near future, this is something that everybody should be paying attention. It seems like talk to people and they feel like this is all the way across the world, and the only feeling that we're getting is our gas prices. That's what you hear everywhere you look in the news and you talk to people. That's I feel like the only thing they can associate with this. But people in the construction industry should actually be looking at not just the gas prices for their fleets, but also what's going to be caused in the near future for the products produced overseas that are getting affected by their, the fuel they take to run their factories, to the fuel for the ships to get to here, to the fuel for the trucks. And like you're just saying right now, there's plenty of plastics used across our products in our industry. Is that price going to start going up now because these corporations and companies are going to start selling us at a higher rate? So now we're going to start seeing even American made products that incorporate these plastics going up. I don't think people think that far into that to understand the implementation, implement how this all applies. Excuse me, we've talked a lot. How this all applies to their day to day and how it may ripple down to them. I mean, you just talked about in the beginning here as well chips. I mean, we're talking at data centers. They need those microchips for those data centers. If I mean, I'm not a wizard, but I'm guessing so because that's what everybody talks about. Are you going to end up halting production on the data centers that you already have locked in for the next 3 years of business because you can't get the materials in to actually get them up and running? And now you're a construction company that's bet the next 3, 4 years on building a massive data center, and now everything's shut down for the foreseeable future because they can't get their shipments of chips out to be able to get the plant up and running. So, I mean, these are things people don't think they need to think about with this. They think it's just oil and gas and diesel, but it really trickles down to the construction industry on many fronts at this time, and it can affect them in the very near future or not affecting them right now. And within the next few weeks to months, really start affecting price of their materials.
That's it. And all we're counting right now is, the timeline between this being, again, a blip and like a moment where, there's an unwinding period and we got to unwind and get back to normal, or does it create a systemic change in how the economy was operating? And we see companies start going in and making those tough decisions, like I've got to go trim headcount because of the cycle I'm in economically. And then the whole recession worry starts to grow and we don't know. The problem is there's no fixed,
Yeah.
rule that says, okay, it's 4 weeks, period.
Yeah.
From the Trump administration, he knew he had a timeline. He knew it was 4 to 5 weeks. He kept saying that right up front, and he knew he had that duration. Yeah, we're gonna get there. We got about another week, and we're at 4 weeks. So,
What do you think the line is to where people in our industry should really start to really pay attention? Obviously, they're being hit on multiple fronts, but where should they say at 8 weeks, I feel like a big red flag should be up? Would you say there's a date right now where people in the construction industry should say, we're going to start feeling this full force after week 8 of this sustained engagement? Is there a
I
certain
think
time?
yeah, I mean, I think the average company is probably carrying 45 to 60 days of inventory on hand. So you think about way upstream in Asia,
Yeah.
okay? So we're probably a week to 2 weeks away from them materially starting to say, "Hey, warning, I may not have material to ship."
Yeah, they're gonna start cutting down on how much they're running at their facilities because they don't have the fuel for it. I mean, I've already seen reports coming in.
Yeah,
The Philippines is calling national security. It's doubled. There's actually places that are cutting down the amount of time they're running the facilities because they don't have enough fuel on hand for their manufacturing. So 2 weeks, if you got your head in the sand, you should really be taking it out no matter where you are in the channel using our good old friend AI we talked about and seeing how this is really affecting you or how it will be affecting you because it's going to start hitting product, it's going to start hitting the supply chain, pricing, possible job shutdowns, and God forbid that R word, the one we don't want to talk about because it causes other financial issues.
right, right, exactly. And again, I mean, it's this is tough to have a conversation like this because this industry is so robust and it's got so much opportunity.
Yeah.
The sky is blue because data center demand, power generation demand, advanced manufacturing, those things that drive our industry has so much demand out there, and our runways are so long. It's tough to sit with a straight face and say, "Hey, be worried," because
Yeah.
it could
But I
happen.
mean, the fact is, like you said, I mean, most of the things you just mentioned there use microchips to run. If you're building a factory with automation, you need microchips. If you're building a data center, you need micro. Really, most of the things you need microchips. Well, then if you're running cable, you need the shielding, which is probably coming from the petro, which is going to be jacked up in pricing, which depending where you're getting that could be delayed. And I mean, it seems like there's a massive, as much as the sky is blue, I'm not saying the sky is falling, but I'm saying, doesn't it? could be some red flags that there would be some issues, even though this is a robust industry that could cause slowdowns or people that double think moving forwards with projects, which we and Sal already heard people have in the most recent, year. Could it incline people to say, hey, I was going to do this, but let's wait this out because price costs are going up again? Or data centers being put on hold because microchips to put them, or we don't have this to do something. Let's just pause this for the time being. We'll come back. I don't know if that's a thing. I don't know how that industry really works, if they have them sitting around.
Well, and
It
I was
seems
gonna
like
say
there should be some concern, even though the sky is blue for them, that there could be some kind of hiccup.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the data centers and power generation are getting higher margin chips, and because of that, I don't think they will have necessarily a problem, but it's gonna be those guys who are feeding automotive and cell
Okay.
phone manufacturing. It's gonna be those lower cost chips. That's where the shortages are, and that's where they're already getting some warning. You saw some
Forget
industries out there.
everything I just said about data centers. We'll just delete that from the conversation.
Yeah, no, 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 I actually, no, I think you're right on, because but they may get the allocation, but everybody else suffers, right?
Yeah.
So, and that could be what ultimately how this plays out is
Yeah.
I'm gonna allocate it for data centers and power gen. Everybody else, sorry, you're out of luck, because I'm gonna take whatever resources I do have and I'm gonna allocate it to those higher margin chips. So we already saw, like, you saw some of the cell phone companies and some of those industries, some of those who are feeding microchips to those industries saw their stocks plummet over the last week. I was like, what is going on? Why would their stocks go down if there's like a shortage of chips? And what they're saying is because of the shortages, they're not going to be able to produce as many cell phones this year. And so they're not able to even order from those companies who would be producing those chips. Those companies are going to switch over to other stuff. So the
Yeah.
volumes are going down and no one's going to be as profitable. And so that's why we see them bailing out of some of those companies. And I kind
So
of
in
expect
your
an all-in moment, but it wasn't.
so in your opinion, in your professional opinion, holds 30 years, where mine has a decade, and what I do doesn't even have the insight and robustness of what you're bringing to the table. But construction right now, we're in a good space. We have a lot going on. Things are rolling along. Really, no big worries right now. Obviously, we're seeing momentarily fuel costs are going up. We could start feeling some other pricing for products start going up in the very near future, depending on how long this proceeds. But for right now, we're good. The industry in the near future is going to be pretty resilient, even if we start seeing costs. But we could start seeing some big price increases if this does wrap itself up over the next month or so, I'm guessing. And it could start seeing some supply issues and price increases and those lines, but we should be able to hold firm still. We shouldn't see a big disruption, just maybe some pricing.
Yeah, the only 2 things I would say in construction, I'm just hearing whispers about, right, is a little bit in manufacturing, and I think what it is I think we're delivering a lot of projects. A lot of projects that started in 21 and 22 are now delivering. And so we're seeing total manufacturing construction spending and the latest data down about 15% year over year. But I think it's that gap between we're delivering projects and the new projects are just a little bit on hold.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we're
And
not
you
quite.
started talking with another guy that he was saying, project GCs and were sending out bids, but then they weren't pulling the trigger. The
Yeah,
property owners were backing off once they were getting this able to see the real numbers. And this was about a year ago. No, 9 months ago. So there was still some higher costs. They were holding off to see what was going to happen, and we heard the same thing. So
yeah.
he was saying a lot of guys are wrapping up the projects they were on, which were a lot of those mixed residential use that you see pop up around the country, and now they're sort of seeing what's next.
Yeah. Well, I heard projects the other day, cold chain projects, which are massive projects, big cold chain warehouses, and they were on hold waiting on power generation capabilities to get completed before they could even start the cold chain project. And so you've also got those kinds of like delay ripples.
Yeah. So for right now, obviously this war in Iran, we're feeling it at the pump. We're
Yeah.
gonna possibly, if it continues on, start feeling it in some other ways. Construction should be able to weather this for a little bit, but if we go another month, 2 months out, we're going to start seeing some real issues with our supply chains, some real issues with pricing that are going to be because of what's happening today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I think that's as good an estimate as any of us have got right now.
All right. So keep an eye out 30, 60 days. Hopefully this wraps itself up. But if you're in the industry, keep an eye out. Maybe put a little reminder there to sort of see where we're at, revisit because, we talked about it this whole time. Nobody's equating that those tankers stuck up in the northern part of the strait. They got stuff that needs to get down to India that then needs to use that to fuel their manufacturing that gets the products onto another boat and container that needs to get fuel to ship it to the US port for us to use it. I don't think everybody's putting those dots together yet, of really
Well,
how it could affect us.
yeah, and also remember, 200 ships a day were transiting the strait. Only 70 of those were petroleum or fuel related. The other 130 were other stuff, and that other stuff
And
also
I
goes
think,
in.
and that's what people don't talk about is that other
Yeah,
stuff. Everybody talks about, it was gasoline and fuel and oil and diesel and fertilizer started getting talked about recently. Nobody's talking about the other stuff. So,
yeah, that's it.
like you said, we're talking about plastics and we're talking about stuff for microchips. There's a lot to be affected. So, right now, issues at the pumps. Hopefully, this resolves itself. But if not, the next 30, 60 days, we can start seeing some supply chain issues for the construction industry and possibly some pricing issues with some increases. And then after that, if we keep going after that 60 days, do we even want to talk about that? We all know where that's going to go pretty much. We'll just leave it at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, leave
Yeah.
it at that. Yeah, let's leave it there. I think there are a lot of forces out there that don't wanna see it go beyond the next 2 weeks, so
Yeah. I mean, it seemed like it. It seemed like the conversation was always 4 to 6 weeks. I know there's people that don't want to see it go farther than that. I know there's a lot of talk recently in trying to wrap it up. We'll have to
yeah,
hope that it gets taken care of. So, yeah, we're going to get this out there. Hopefully, everybody just, we're doing this so people get an understanding because, as we said, I don't think everybody understands the full impact that this has up and down the channel. So,
yeah,
something to take note of, something to keep in the back of your mind if you're estimating projects. You never know. I mean, if we go past that 60 days, could be seeing some price increases that you weren't expecting and it ain't going to be for tariffs. So,
that's right. Yeah,
all right, sir. As always, greatly appreciate it. Thanks, Keith.
absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thank